The champagne flutes were already filled when Adeze noticed something was wrong. She was 7 years old, the daughter of Beatrice Okafor, one of the kitchen assistants hired for the evening, and she had no business being in the main hall of the Ashford estate at all. Her mother had told her to stay in the break room off the pantry, had told her twice, had given her a juice box and a coloring book, and the kind of firm look that meant it. But Adeze had finished her juice and lost interest in the book, and the music from the hall sounded like something from a movie, so she had wandered through the door and stood now just inside the arched entrance, half hidden behind a column draped in white linen. The hall was extraordinary. Adeze had never seen a room that size, that wasn't a school gymnasium. Crystal chandeliers hung in 2 rows down the length of the ceiling. Round tables were set with gold chargers and flowers she couldn't name. Servers moved between guests in black uniforms, carrying trays at shoulder height, like they'd been born doing it. At the far end of the room, near the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the lake, a long head table had been set up for the partners of Alderton and Croft, the law firm celebrating its 40th anniversary that evening. The firm's founding partner, Edmund Croft, sat near the center. He was 63, white-haired, broad-shouldered in the way men are when they were once athletic and still carry the frame of it. He was laughing at something the man beside him had said, his hand flat on the table, rings catching the light. Adeze watched him the way children watch adults they've decided to study. She couldn't have said why she chose him and not someone else. The evening had been organized by Croft's daughter-in-law, Margot. That was what Adeze's mother had told one of the other kitchen staff earlier, in a tone that meant something complicated. Margot Croft had coordinated the venue, the caterers, the flowers, the music, and the gift presentation that was scheduled to take place before dessert. She had arrived at the estate 2 hours before the guests, clipboard in hand, and had personally overseen the arrangement of the presentation table at the front of the room, where a collection of gifts from the partners sat alongside one very large, very deliberate box wrapped in deep burgundy paper with a cream satin ribbon. The box was from Margot herself. Adeze had been near the pantry door when Margot came through to speak to the catering supervisor. She'd heard the name of the box. Edmund's gift, she'd called it, singular, as though the others didn't quite count. She'd had a specific instruction about when it was to be brought out, in what order, and she'd said it with the careful precision of someone who had rehearsed the instruction so many times it no longer sounded like caring. It sounded like management. That should have meant nothing to a 7-year-old hiding behind a column, except that an hour earlier, Adeze had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. She'd slipped out of the break room earlier than she later admitted to her mother. She'd been thirsty, and the juice box was gone, and she knew the catering staff kept water bottles in the small storage room near the loading bay. She'd gone through the service corridor and taken a wrong turn and found herself in a narrow hallway that ran behind the estate's secondary sitting room. The door to that room was slightly ajar. Margot's was inside. She was on the phone. She was standing with her back to the door, one hand pressed flat against the window glass, looking out at the darkening water. Adeze had stopped because she recognized the voice, sharp, low, the same voice that had given instructions about the box, and because something in the posture of the woman made her go very still, in the way children go still when they understand, without being told, that they are witnessing something not meant for them. She only caught part of it. Once it's open, that's it. He won't know until it's too late. The firm goes to Harrison. That's always been the plan. And then Margot had turned slightly, and Adeze had pressed herself against the wall and stopped breathing. She didn't know what it meant. She was 7. She didn't know about inheritance structures or partnership agreements, or the kind of quiet legal violence that happens in rooms like that one. But she knew the voice had not been warm, and she knew the box was from Margot, and she knew in the wordless, instinctual way that children sometimes know things, that what she had heard and what she had seen were connected. She went back to the break room and sat with the coloring book and didn't color anything. By the time she crept into the main hall and found her column, the evening was well advanced. Speeches had been made. The partners had toasted 40 years of the firm. There had been a video presentation on a screen at the front of the room. Photographs from the early days, Edmund Croft as a young man with dark hair and a suit that didn't fit him yet, building something with nothing but time and stubbornness. The guests had applauded. Edmund had looked at his hands. Now the presentation table was being brought forward. A junior associate, Adeze, didn't know, wheeled the table on its casters to the front of the room, and the conversation dropped a level, the way it does when something formal is about to happen. Margot rose from her seat. She was elegant in the particular way of women who have worked hard to appear effortless. Dark dress, hair up, the kind of composure that photographs well. She took the small wireless microphone from the podium and smiled at the room, and the room smiled back because that is what rooms do. Edmund Croft has spent 40 years building something that most people only dream about, she said. Her voice was even and warm. Not just a firm, but a standard, a name that means something in this city. And tonight, on behalf of the family, it's my honor to present him with a small token of everything this anniversary represents. The applause was generous. Edmund laughed in the way men laugh when they're genuinely embarrassed by attention. His son, Margot's husband, Nathan Croft, was seated 2 chairs down and was clapping with the rest of them. The burgundy box was lifted from the presentation table by one of the servers. It was substantial, about the size of a case of wine, but square, heavier looking. The cream ribbon gleamed. Daisy's chest went tight. She stepped out from behind the column. She did not have a plan. She was not brave in the way stories sometimes describe bravery. The standing up straight, the clear voice, the perfect words. She was a 7-year-old in a kitchen worker's daughter dress, and the thing in her chest was not courage, but something closer to the feeling you get at the edge of a diving board. When you have already decided to jump, and the only question is the timing. Edmund reached for the ribbon. "Don't open it, sir." Her voice came out smaller than she'd expected. The server holding the box turned. Margot's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. Edmund looked up and looked around and then found her, this small girl standing in the middle of the hall in her gray dress, with the smocked front, alone, 10 feet from the head table. "I'm sorry," Edmund said. He wasn't unkind. He was genuinely confused. "Don't open the box," Daisy said again. Louder now because she had already done the hardest part, which was beginning. The silence in the room was not complete. There was still the soft sound of the music system, still the clink of glass somewhere near the back. But the attention of every person at the head table was now on her. A man to Edmund's left, a partner named Clifford Bowen, leaned forward. "Who does this child belong to?" he said, not cruelly, but in the voice of someone accustomed to problems being solved by someone else. "My mom works in the kitchen," Ade said. "I'm not supposed to be out here, I know. But I heard something. And the box." She stopped. She looked at the box. The server had not put it down. He was holding it at waist height, slightly uncertain, looking at Edmund for guidance. "I heard someone talking about the box. I think something's wrong with it." Margot set the microphone down on the table with a sound that was almost nothing. "She wandered in from the service area," Margot said. Her tone was the careful flatness of someone deciding quickly how much force to apply. Someone should take her back to her mother. "She said she heard something," Edmund said. He had not looked away from Adaise. "What did you hear?" Adaise told him. Not perfectly. She was 7, and the words she had overheard were adult words that she only half understood, and she had been frightened when she heard them, and fear does not preserve memory cleanly. But she said the name Harrison. She said the firm goes to Harrison. She said she'd heard it was the plan, once the box was open. Edmund Croft had spent 40 years in a profession that required him to listen to people who were afraid and find the true thing inside what they were saying. He was quiet for a moment. And then he looked at Margot. "Margot," he said, "what's in the box?" The room was paying close attention now. The guests at the nearest tables had gone still. The servers had stopped moving. "Edmund, this is," Margot began. "I'd like you to open it," he said. "Go ahead and open it yourself." Something crossed her face. It was quick and controlled and almost entirely masked. But it was there. Edmund saw it. Daisy saw it, though she could not have named what it was. She learned the name for it much later, when she was older, and had reason to think back on that evening. It was the face of a calculation being run and a conclusion being reached. "I'll have someone call security," Margot said. "This is absurd, a child walking in off the street." "She's not off the street. Her mother works here." Edmund pushed back his chair and stood. He was tall when he stood, and the room responded to that the way rooms respond to the movement of people who are accustomed to being responded to. "And I didn't ask for security. I asked you to open the box." Nathan Croft had not spoken. He was sitting very still, looking at his wife, and Adaise could not read his expression. "Clifford," Edmund said to the partner beside him, "call David Lung. He's downstairs, I know he is. He never leaves a party early. Tell him I need him up here." David Leung, Adaise would later learn, was Edmund's personal lawyer and the only person at the firm who was not a Croft family appointment, who had been there before the money was fully settled and the power was fully arranged, who had known Edmund in the years when the firm was still a dream running on credit. He arrived in 4 minutes, still holding his napkin. In the meantime, no one had opened the box. Margot had not sat back down. She was standing with the same composed stillness as before, but it had changed texture. It had become the stillness of someone holding a position, not the ease of someone who belongs in one. Nathan had quietly left the table, no announcement, and was standing near the window with his back to the room. Adese's mother arrived at almost the same moment as David Lung, having been told by one of the servers that her daughter had come through to the main hall. Beatrice Okafor came in from the side door, saw her daughter standing in the middle of the room, and went straight to her. She crouched down and put both hands on Adese's shoulders and whispered in Yoruba, asking if she was all right. "I'm fine, Mum," Adese whispered back. "Please don't take me away yet." Beatrice looked at the assembled room, at the box still in the server's hands, at Edmund Croft standing at the head table watching her daughter. She made a decision that she would think about many times afterward. She stayed. David Lung examined the box without opening it first. He walked around it once and then asked the server to set it on a clear section of the presentation table. He looked at the ribbon and the paper and the seam at the bottom. He asked the server who had handled it. Two people. Himself and the woman who had brought it in earlier that evening, who turned out to be a private courier Margot had hired independently, not through the estate's normal event services. Edmund, Lung said, his voice professionally neutral. "I think we call the police before anyone opens this. That's—" Margot took half a step forward. "That is completely out of proportion. You're taking the word of a child who wandered in from the staff area over." "I'm not taking anyone's word," Leung said. He looked at her with the steady patience of a man who had been in difficult rooms for a long time. "I'm acting with appropriate caution. Edmund, it's your call." Edmund looked at Adese. She was standing next to her mother now, her mother's hand on her shoulder. She looked back at him with the directness that children have when they have done something they know was right and are waiting to see what the world does with it. "Call them," Edmund said. The guests at the near tables began quietly to move back. Two officers arrived within 20 minutes. The box was examined. The paper was cut along the seam. Inside, surrounded by custom foam padding, was an object that the officers recognized immediately, and that caused the senior officer to clear the immediate area and make a second call. Adese did not see what was inside. Her mother had moved her to the side of the room, by then, near the door, and had put herself between Adese and the table. What she saw was the reaction. The officer's posture changing, the quiet exchange of words over the radio, the way Edmund Croft sat back down in his chair as though something in his legs had decided to stop cooperating. Margot was escorted from the room within the half hour. Nathan Croft sat by the window for a long time before anyone came to speak to him. Edmund Croft did not return to the party after that. The evening was dissolved by the estate manager with the polished tact of someone who has handled the aftermath of difficult things before. Guests were thanked and seen out. The catering staff finished what they were doing and were told they could leave. Beatrice gathered her bag and her coat and her daughter's hand. They were nearly to the service exit when one of Leung's associates came to find them. He asked them, very politely, to wait a few more minutes. Adese sat on a folding chair in the service corridor outside the kitchen. She was tired. The adrenaline that had moved through her body for the last 2 hours had left her hollow, and she leaned against her mother's arm without quite meaning to. Beatrice said nothing. She had been saying nothing since the officers arrived, which was not her natural state. She was a woman who filled silences, who talked while she worked, who narrated the small events of a day as they happened. The quiet meant she was thinking hard. "Are you angry?" Adese asked. "No," Beatrice said. "Not at you." A pause. "I don't know what I am yet." Edmund Croft came to the service corridor himself. He looked diminished in a way he hadn't before. Not smaller, exactly, but like something that had been holding a shape had let go of it. He stood in the corridor with his jacket still on, the cream boutonniere from his lapel missing, and looked at Adese with an expression she couldn't fully read, but that felt important. "Your name," he said. "Adese Okafor," she said. He said it back to her. Carefully, the way people say names they want to remember. "Do you understand what you did tonight?" he asked. She thought about it. "I think so," she said. "Mostly." "Good enough," he said. He crouched down to her level, which surprised her. She hadn't expected a man like him to do that. "I want to tell you that what you did required a great deal of courage. More than most adults I know, and I want you to know that it mattered." Adese nodded. She didn't know what to say to that, so she didn't say anything. Edmund looked up at Beatrice. "I know this isn't the time, but I'd like to speak with you properly when things are settled. I want to make sure Adese has what she needs. School and after school and the things that come after that." Beatrice looked at him for a long moment. She was not a woman who accepted things easily, and Edmund could see that, and he did not look away from it. "We'll talk," she said finally. He nodded. He looked at Adese one more time. "Thank you," he said, as plainly as that, without decoration. "Thank you for saying something." They took the service exit out to the parking lot, where the October air came off the lake cold and clean and smelling of the first suggestions of winter. Adese walked beside her mother across the asphalt toward the bus stop, their breath small clouds ahead of them. "Mum," she said. Hmm, what was in the box? Beatrice was quiet for a moment. Something very dangerous, she said. That's all I know right now. But he's okay. He's okay. Adaze considered this. The evening played back in her mind in fragments, the chandeliers, the ribbon, the way Edmund Croft had looked at her when she said, "Don't open it, sir." Not dismissive, not annoyed, just present, just actually listening. He listened, she said. He did. Her mother agreed. The bus was coming up the hill, its headlights sweeping the curve of the road. Beatrice tightened her hand around her daughter's. They stood together and waited for it. 7 months later, Adaze Okafor started at Harwick Academy on a full education trust established in her name by Edmund Croft and administered by David Lung's office. The terms of the trust extended to university. Edmund Croft attended her first day of school, not in any official capacity, just as a man who had asked if he could be there and been told by Beatrice, after some consideration, that he could. Margot Croft was charged that autumn with several offenses that the papers covered extensively, and Adaze's mother said she didn't need to read yet. Nathan Croft filed for divorce the following spring. Edmund returned to the firm, restructured its partnership agreement, and appointed David Leung as co-managing partner, the first person outside the Croft family to hold that position in 40 years. He kept, on the corner of his desk, a small framed photograph from that evening, not of himself, but of the presentation table. Empty, the cream ribbon on the floor beside it, the box already being examined by the first officer. He kept it because he needed the occasional reminder that the most important thing a person can do sometimes is to stop and listen to someone who is telling the truth in a room of people who have decided, without hearing her, that she doesn't know what she's talking about. Adaze was 12 before she fully understood what had been inside the box. She went back and looked it up. She read the court records, which were public, and the news articles, and the one long piece in a legal journal that outlined the full scope of what had been planned, the partnership clause that would have transferred Edmund's controlling shares upon his death or incapacitation. The beneficiary named the years of quiet preparation. She sat with it for a while. Then she closed the laptop and went downstairs where her mother was making dinner and the kitchen was warm and the radio was on, and she said nothing about it, because some things you carry quietly and put down gently, and that's enough.